I am here with Clover Moore, who is the Lord Mayor of Sydney. Clover, you have been Lord Mayor of Sydney for 20 years, is that right?
Yes.
And I have very cheekily come here to ask you a question because active transport, which for those who don't know what that is, that's walking, cycling,
Taking light rail?
yeah, all that stuff, where you move, right? You have been a proponent of that for donkey's years, way before it was cool. And I'm actually just genuinely interested in when you learnt about that and how you learnt about that.
I think I got interested when the Labor Party under Premier Carr introduced light rail to the inner west. Mm-hmm. And he also undertook to extend it as a network. And I thought this was a really exciting thing to do. And then moving the dial forward to 2003 when the then Labor government sacked the City Council and South Sydney Council and amalgamated them and brought in a part of Leichhardt, Glebe, and then held an election in 3 weeks.
In 3 weeks?
There was three weeks' notice of this election. And I had been subjected to state governments manipulating the city and South Sydney, all of my political life, actually. And why I ran for Parliament in the first place was that the council had been sacked that I'd been on. And I thought, I've got to get into state Parliament if I want to do anything on the things I really care about, which was about the urban environment. And so when it happened again, and those councils were sacked, I was really outraged. And so even though I was a very happy member for Bligh and member for Sydney, when people said, you must put a team together and fight this, I decided I would, even though I was in Parliament at the time. And so we had a 3-week campaign, very short time to put together our platform. But there were things I knew I wanted to have on that platform, and one of them was light rail and to have a network for light rail. The other thing I knew I wanted to have was a long-term strategic plan for Sydney. There hadn't really been one since the mid-70s. And so we ran that campaign and they're at the top of the agenda. And so when we got in here, we wanted to implement it. And so through the work we did to establish the long-term plan, which became Sustainable Sydney 2030, very much part of that was active transport. And it was very interesting because when I was first elected as mayor, it was not only the cycling residential enthusiasts who wanted bike lanes. We had none in Sydney at all.
Wow.
And it was also the business community, the executives who worked in an office all day and went to the gym at night, wanted to be able to cycle from their homes, whether it was on the North Shore or the eastern suburbs.
They wanted a bit of exercise.
They wanted exercise, but they wanted to be part of their life, so they didn't have to. So it was really interesting. And so, to introduce cycling into a city that had none, it was revolutionary. And Alan Jones took me on straight away. And people watching this probably don't even remember who Alan Jones is, but he's
a shock.
He was the most influential person in politics in Australia for many years, which was really shocking. Whether it was the Labor Party or the Coalition, they all did what Alan Jones told them to do. He was so powerful because he had so many listeners, and all those listeners were voters. And so he just took me on, and it was terrible. I was thrown into that bail box and sent out to sea with Julia Gillard during those times, and that was about setting up safe, separated cycling lanes. So that's when we started on the cycling work. And
we're talking 20 years ago that you were really
1% of people cycled at that time. and my first cycle lane was Burke Street.
Right.
Burke Street's one of the most successful, and it was the first. And because I was in Parliament and also in Council, I was having elections every 2 years.
Wow.
And
Clover's an independent, I should point that out.
Yes.
Right?
So some of my staff said, "Are you sure about this? We've got another state election, And I said, yes, because we did consult. And some of those meetings were pretty heady. Again, it was as though I was going to, end the world by putting a cycle lane. And quite a few of those people that came to those consultations just moved. The other people who stayed had dramatic increase in the value in their properties,
Isn't it amazing?
It is truly amazing. It was a cycle lane, and during this time I was going to C40 conferences overseas, and visiting cities like Amsterdam and Copenhagen, and it was just a part of life.
Yeah.
So so introducing it here was really, really hard. And when we were in the middle of the construction of Burke Street, I had an election, and they had the people going to vote at Burke Street's public school had to climb over rubble associated with the construction to vote. And do you know what? I got one of my highest votes in that polling booth.
Yes, there you go.
So that, so and a lot of times people say, "You sure you want to do this? Lose votes over this?" And I'd say, "We will do it. We've done the consultation. We know it's needed. It's the right thing to do. We'll do it." And so one of the things is you've got to have courage, and you've got to believe in what you do. But I went to so many meetings, and I just told them, because at this time I'd been to my first C40 conference, and I really came home with a profound understanding of how horrific global warming was going to be. And what an important part that the cities had to play, because 75% of emissions are in our cities. And so, and of course, we're the city of Sydney, we're only 25 square kilometres, but we can set an example, and we do, and we share our information and our resources with the other councils in the metropolitan area. So we, after that first C40 conference, I knew that we had to take action and get our emissions down. And where were our emissions? They are in our commercial buildings, they're in our street lights, they're in our transport. We don't run transport, but what we do is we can do bike lanes. And so that was our, real contribution, and lobbied for light rail. And then we ended up putting 300 million into the light rail. We did all the paving and landscaping and tree planting and putting in the seats and making it a beautiful place for people to be. The government did the transport.
Be so different if they had done the original plan, which was to have the overhead wires.
I know.
I remember you fighting for that.
We did fight for that, and we only got it for the CBD. We didn't get it for the area beyond the CBD, and it's shocking, And if you're going to do a project like this, you do it really well.
Actually, I did have a question about the bicycle lanes. Do you feel like COVID and then e-bikes have really brought that amazing network you've built into its own now?
I don't know. I think people had taken to cycling.
They have, haven't they?
They have, and it's to be expected. I mentioned Copenhagen, and we have a relationship with Copenhagen because Jan Gehl, who is the Danish urbanist who's done work in Melbourne, done work in New York, done in most of the major cities. And to help get the government over the line in terms of doing light rail in George Street, we brought Jan Gehl out. And in fact, his people worked here for about a year just looking at movements of people and what was needed. And so he could give us advice. It was advice that we already knew because we came in on a platform of light rail. But once an overseas expert tells Australians what's the best thing to do, we seem to need that confidence. We can't establish that something's important and should be done until an expert from overseas comes and tells us this is what you must do. Yeah. But he was very good because at that time we were thinking about which would be the best street to put it down. Was it going to be George Street? Was it going to be Pitt Street? Was it going to be Elizabeth Street? And he said, no, George Street, from Central to Circular Quay. And once he said that, it gave us confidence to go with that. But that didn't mean that the government was particularly happy about that or anyone was interested. And so anyway, that was the beginning of... And I got Gladys Berejiklian, who was the Premier. I got her to come to a city talk where Jan Gehl spoke and gave her Jan Gehl's book, and so she was. He also helped bring her over the line too.
Right.
Yes, and then so I went to a C40 conference in Copenhagen at the time the national leaders were meeting for the COP, and it was in December. It was and very, very cold, middle of winter. And we were working with the Lord Mayor of Copenhagen, and we put on an Earth Hour together.
When was this?
In 2009.
Yep.
And we did our speeches, and I did my speech in English, and they all clapped and cheered. It was really so nice. And
Yep.
she did hers. And then we're in front of the town hall, and it was this lovely courtyard, and all these people were there, and it started to snow. And so when we finished and said goodbye to them all, turned all the lights off in Copenhagen for Earth Hour, they all went and got their bikes, brushed the snow off, and they cycled off. And I'd go, remember back in 2009 in Sydney, you know, not a bike lane at that stage because we hadn't built it yet.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow. And I felt a further wow the next morning, because we were staying in a hotel on the main street, and I watched the snow ploughs removing the snow so transport could happen. And guess what they did first?
The bike lanes.
They did the bike lanes.
Wow.
And I thought, wow.
That's it's prioritising things.
It was their priority. And you know, wiping the snow off the seat of the bike and then cycling off, it was so encouraging for me to know. And so seeing that, and then on the way to Copenhagen, we'd gone via Amsterdam too, and I just saw all the bikes parked. And the other time, we're a sister city of Nagoya, and earlier I'd been to Nagoya, which is an inland city, not very attractive, but with wide footpaths, telegraph poles everywhere and wires, but everyone cycled, and they cycle on these very wide footpaths. And there'd be ladies in their silk dresses and men in their suits, and other people be walking along. And, you know, there was no animosity, there was no collision. It was so civilised. And again, I was so amazed, because you know how in Sydney everything's fast, cars have to go fast, and people have to walk fast on the footpath, and the bikes now, especially the e-bikes, they're all going too fast. You know, it's you know, here in Nagoya, they just cycled along. And then when they got to their destination, they left the bike there. See, I'm full of bike stories now. They left the bike there, and they don't lock them.
Yeah, like in Copenhagen.
I'm not sure about Copenhagen, but I know in Nagoya, no one steals anything, so you don't need to lock anything up.
Wow.
And so I've been a bit inspired by these various cities that I've been to. So I knew in other places this was the norm. In Sydney it wasn't the norm, and it was just a big battle, and Alan Jones going on and bringing people at an election time. And it was really good, because he called upon all these people to catch the train in and have a big demonstration in front of the town hall, and no one came.
Alan.
Yeah.
Yes, good times.
But he was very powerful. So that's the colourful history of those bike lanes. But we're still facing the same thing. One of the most used bike routes, I won't say bike lane because there isn't one there at the moment, but the routes is Oxford Street, because it's on the cusp of the hill. And it's very I have cycled down it, and it's as scary as all.
It is. I have too.
It's really scary, and it suits people who want to get thrills doing that. But for a normal cyclist wanting to just go to work, it's really, really scary. And so we finally got the coalition government to agree to partner with us on doing Oxford Street, and we were to do the section from College Street, where we were able to reopen the bike lane that the previous coalition minister had closed.
That's a bike lane that was there and then ripped up and put back in.
That's right. So 4 million to go in, 3 million to come out, 4 million to go back. Very good use of public money.
Wonderful.
All based on ideology, conservative ideology, or ideology that's dictated to by the car lobby. You know, the car lobby, liquor lobby, they have very strong lobbies in Sydney and in New South Wales. So we agreed to do it, and we're making great headway. I walk that way into town, and I saw it there this morning. It's really advancing. It's terrific. Their section, they haven't sort of even finished the consulting, have they? And the thing is, if you're doing something which people still think is controversial, and people in Paddington do still think it's controversial, some people do, you do the consultation, you make the decision, you get on with it, so that they can see the benefit of it. But now this has been around for a couple of years, and so they've really, a lot of older people have worked up a real scare thing about it, and they've influenced their friends. And I was standing on the footpath and a bike nearly ran me over, and they all get together and you know, so anyway, we're building the most wonderful bike track.
It looks great. I saw it yesterday.
It's really good. It's really good, isn't it? That's like the way we've done the bus stops.
Yes.
People really love it. So, but on the other side, once it gets to Taylor Square, fortunately, all the people that have come up Burke Street will be able to join.
Right.
But the people from the eastern suburbs who, at the moment, get as far as the end of Centennial Park.
They're missing that connection.
From Centennial Park down to Taylor Square, it's dangerous. So it's, you know, it's still a challenge in some groups.
It's taking away people's parking spots. That's the big thing, isn't it?
But it's not taking away the parking spots.
I know, but that's like immediately they jump on that. Oh, where am I? You know, there's that panic.
Their parking spots are not being taken on this particular
and
project.
yet, I'm sure someone complained.
Well, you know, the businesses think, but you know, people really love walking, and to be able to walk to the park, walk to the shops, walk to the city. It's fantastic. I walk into the city and it's wonderful. I walk up Burke Street, walk down Oxford Street, go through Hyde Park. I'm at Town Hall.
Yeah, I ride to you from my house. It's the most glorious ride. It's nearly all separated cycle paths or quiet back streets. It's absolutely amazing.
And those quiet ways work well too.
Brilliantly.
You only really need to put the separated cycleway in heavily trafficked, unsafe for cyclists.
Yeah.
Roads.
Do you have a favourite bicycle path?
Bicycle.
Like just a separated bike path that you've created?
I'm pretty keen on Burke Street.
Oh, she loves, but I love Wilson Street. That's my favourite.
Wilson Street is, and the way it goes around the trees.
It's so beautiful.
And I think that is beautiful. I do think that's beautiful, yeah, in terms of design.
A triumph in terms of separating the cars, the bike path, and then the footpath.
We got down to the end. It's turns into with the shops there.
Yes, I haven't ridden on that bit yet.
Right, okay. We saved a very important tree there. I've just forgotten what it is now, but it's a very beautiful tree. When we're doing Burke Street, people are very concerned about the trees. It's got, you know, some avenue of wonderful planes, and so we've taken the bike path out round the trees.
Yeah.
Which is really
it's
nice.
very special to ride on. And I personally would just like to thank you for all the bike paths, because I sold my car and that's how I get around, and I feel very safe doing it.
That's good hearing that.
Yeah.
That's good hearing that. I think that too. I think I think they're fantastic. I have a little smile of joy as I walk. Well, I'm a walker now, and we've created a lovely walking city too.
Yeah, you have. Well done, Clover. Well, thank you so much for giving me your time. You're such a legend. Love you.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure.